All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our third heaping cup of conversations on careers outside of academia, where we are trying to provide both career spotlights and some resources for faculty members and undergraduates who are looking for what else is available to us and how do we educate ourselves in terms of careers that we can pursue with a very cool astronomy degree. So with that said, we have two really great speakers today, both of whom I know personally. Mallory is on the education committee here, and Rachel I've known for a long time and watched her grow through her career, and I think that we'll have some really great talks today. And we're going to start off with just a couple. I want people to be able to add things to the agenda. So typically what I do when I'm running a group like this is I make sure that I have access to the agenda, which I just put into the chat. You are welcome to go in there and add your information. I've got a section in there, recommendations and reminders from the community. So if you have any resources to share with the community that I can push out, please feel free to type those in, or anything like that. I am currently doing a deep dive into mentorship, and I'm reading a really excellent book that I will report on at some point about how to mentor anybody in academia. And it's well done. Just read a synopsis on it and decided that I needed to give it the full read. So hopefully it's really looking at reinventing how we think about mentorship in this day and age when we have succeeded in diversifying our student population, and what do we really have? What do we do when we actually can't relate to people's life experience? What's our job, and where does our responsibility stop, and how do we support people? So with that, does anyone else have any particular resource or announcement that you'd like to share with the group right now? Feel no pressure on that, because Rachel's going to really tell some things. All right. So with that, I would like to introduce you to Dr. Rachel Freed. And she has been doing some really great work in terms of evaluation in astronomy. I've seen her teaching skills. She has done, she's an excellent educator and really knows her variable stars, and has pushed out a lot of really great leadership in the area of education. And so she's going to be talking to us about an effort that was made last year by UNC Chapel Hill to think about some dangerous questions in astronomy. And she's going to give us a summary of that work that is going to be published soon. And we'll just get a preview of what's going to be said. So with that, I hand it over to Rachel.
All right. Thanks, Kate. I'm excited to be here. So let me start can't start my slideshow before I start screen sharing. Hold on. Share screen. And there we go. Okay, so this was the Astro Adjunct Ed UNC conference that we had. We had about 80 educators and educational researchers from the astronomy community come together at UNC Chapel Hill last June to talk about what is astronomy education and where do we go from here? What do we do now? And so there were 6 main themes that we thought about. We thought about the context of astronomy on the sort of the larger picture, and the content, skills. What skills are we teaching? Do we want to be teaching? Engagement beyond the classroom, and astronomy education research. And I'm going to touch on a little of each of these. I will say I found it difficult to summarize the 113-page document that we created at this meeting in a 15-20-minute talk here, but I tried. So the context really is astronomy, we're trying to understand our place in the universe. It's something that inspires naturally. It just has this natural draw and curiosity that it inspires in people. And it's changed a lot over the last 150 years, really from an observational science to a data-driven science, and it's quite interdisciplinary. So some of the questions we asked were, how does astronomy fit into other STEM disciplines? And is astronomy actually a gateway to other STEM disciplines? So it's often referred to as the gateway science, and there's kind of a couple meanings to that. One, you learn some astronomy and then you get inspired and then you want to study science. Maybe that works. Maybe that's how it works. The other idea is just that it's so interconnected to the other sciences. So it's connected to chemistry and history and math, of course. And this bottom image is a light pollution map. So astronomy is related to sort of environmental studies in terms of dark sky sites and light pollution. And so I will tell you, just spoiler alert, we don't have definitive answers to all the dangerous questions we asked, but it was a really good conversation and really good for all of us as the community to be thinking about these things. So in terms of content, we really were asking, what do we hope students learn, and recognize that that's going to be very different from what they actually learn. And within this conversation, aligning content with learning outcomes is really, really important. So there's this almost a continuum from just engendering curiosity amongst the students and latching on to the inspiration of astronomy, to then developing their quantitative skills, their critical thinking skills, and hopefully leading to building some sort of STEM identity. Now, one theme that runs throughout this whole discussion and the conference was, our Astronomy 101 classes are really reaching different audiences. We have our non-STEM students and our STEM students, and they're very different audiences with very different needs. And so, and yet they're all often taking the same class together. And so how do we address everyone in that way? So content, there's a lot of stuff on these two slides about content, because basically we're trying to teach the entire universe. And of course, many schools have Astro 101 and Astro 102. They break it up into solar system and coordinates of the night sky, and then get into stars and galaxies. But a lot of schools have it just all the universe in one semester. And so there are all these amazing topics that we want to teach that can inspire students. You can't teach it all. And then the big question is, what are they going to remember? What do we want them to remember? And does the content actually matter that much if we're trying to teach them skills? And we're going to talk about skills in a little bit, but there's this huge amount of content. What do we, and there's no framework for it. There's no one, like in physics, there's the list of all the physics things that one should learn in first year physics, and same with biology. The community has developed these frameworks, and we don't really have that for introductory astronomy. So what content knowledge do we assume that students will have coming into the course? This was a big question. Fundamental models about the Earth-Sun system, we assume that. But if you're teaching astronomy or taught astronomy, you may know that's not actually the case. There are so many misconceptions, incorrect models. So we can't even assume that. Good study habits, can't even assume that anymore. There was a lot of discussion about how, especially with the COVID years, but even good study habits, you can no longer assume that students have those. Maybe we never should have assumed that. Basic reading and writing skills, again, we can't even assume this so much. So it's becoming more of a struggle. But yet we have to incorporate all of these things into our astro classes. And of course, there's the common thought that astronomy might be the last science course that college students take. That data sort of indicating that is old now, 20 years old at this point, but it still could be very valid. we talked a lot about the importance of formative assessment. You have to see what their skills are, what their mental models are, what their knowledge is, what their math background is. We know that there's a couple years of learning loss in math due to COVID and all that. How important are the prerequisites? This was a big discussion, and I'll tell you, we discussed and we wrote for 3 days. We had discussions amongst the 80 of us, and we wrote about this. And this is just sort of a brief summary of the findings and our conclusions, if we have them, on the answers to these questions. So that will be coming out eventually. So one of the big dangerous questions was, where's that balance between investigation driven approaches and content? Now that we have the technology to say, all right, students, use this global telescope network, collect your own data, and here's how, we'll guide you through analyzing it. The skills, the sense of ownership, which I'll talk more about later, all the sort of valuable skills that they get from doing that kind of thing, do we sacrifice some breadth of content in order to go deep into this, students collecting their own data, investigating these phenomena, understanding the nature of science? So from that, you kind of say, well, should there be a framework of required topics for Astro 101? What would that look like? How do you balance, here's all the required topics, and yet we can do these investigations and do deep dives into, measuring finding the mass of Jupiter by taking images of the moons as they move, etc. All these cool things students can do with the remote telescopes they have access to. And of course, the reason we had this conference was because of the Our Place in Space curriculum developed out of UNC Chapel Hill, which uses the Skynet Global Telescope Network. So we have about 3,000 students a semester using these remote telescopes in their astronomy labs or astronomy classes. And so what is it, how are we going to best use that resource and get the most out of it for our students? So should there be a framework for students? Some teachers with more flexibility argued the framework or what we teach should be based on student interest. One important counter to that is, what about transferability between institutions? You have all these kids in junior college, and then when they go into a four-year university, if they've had astronomy, what is it they'd be expected to know? So there's this real balancing act between all of this. I have a number of slides with lots of words on them. I don't want you to think you have to read all the words, but the main questions: could we do away with textbooks? The resources out there, the amazing YouTube videos, even Instagram and TikTok, there's some valuable stuff there. And then how do we respond to ChatGPT? And there's a really good, this is going to be a good chapter in this paper, because we really have to rethink how we're teaching, how we're assessing students. What does an exam look like in an online class when they have access to ChatGPT? A really big sort of discussion came out of this, which was using AI metacognitively and really having students use AI, learn how to use AI, document their use of AI, understand the pitfalls of AI, and all that. So there was a lot of great discussion around that. What I've heard from the community that AI is best for at this point is coding. You want some Python code to analyze your variable star data? All right, chat, how do I do that? So the next big theme was skills. What skills do we want them to learn? And there was really the question of, do we want them to understand like all the content from how the coordinates of the night sky to the Big Bang and everything in between, or do we want to really focus on skills? And the consensus really was skills. And that content is the vehicle through which we teach these skills. And so maybe there's some flexibility in the content. And there was a lot of talk of numeracy skills and data analysis skills. And I think, with the way that the world around us changes so quickly. We have to teach them how to be adaptable, and the skill set, that they learn now is really great for now, but how do we help them be adaptable in their gaining skills as technology marches on? So these were big discussions. To what degree should we be using real data based investigations to teach content versus more traditional lecture and lab approaches? You might have this is an interesting question, because I've been observing the implementation of these Opus labs I've visited about 15 universities and colleges where they're implementing these telescope based labs, and you see some places where they're doing traditional labs that are more maybe simulation based. Lecturing still is going on the same way it's been going on since it was introduced from Prussia in the 1800s. So there's sort of the whole gamut of the way astronomy is taught. And we're moving into this age where, as I mentioned, students have access to these remote telescopes and they can collect their own data. They can get LIGO data for gravitational waves. What is going to be our best use for the time we have with them and what we can teach them? So, these are some of the observatories that students have access to: the Las Cumbres Observatory, Global Telescope Network, Skynet, Micro Observatory. I know a number of people that use the iTelescope, where you rent the telescope time essentially, although apparently the prices doubled last year, so that's become prohibitive to people who have been using it. But we have these amazing tools at our disposal. How is that changing, or how should that change the way astronomy is taught? That, I think, is the fundamental question that inspired this whole conference. Skills. What about the soft skills? Here, I work with a lot of students that learn how to collect and analyze data and write up their data for publication, published in the Journal of Double Star Observations, present their research at conferences where they get to interact with professionals in the field. So there's this whole other aspect of integrating students into the wider community, and sort of building that community of practice and helping students gain STEM identity. So a lot of words here. There was a big discussion about, again, who are we teaching? There's your students in your Astro 101 class that are going to become astronomers, and they need all the skills. And then there's going to be those that are in other STEM disciplines, and they'll need some of the skills. So how do we, and then the non-STEM students who we really want them to understand how science is done, to understand where data comes from, how it's analyzed. It is a human endeavor. Science does change as we gain new knowledge. We want them to get a sense of this while building skills that are transferable to other fields that they'll be in. So a whole bunch of stuff on that. One of the things I've been studying for the past few years is this sort of self-efficacy component, which is based on increased technical skills, project ownership. This is an interesting one. When I observe these classes, students get a sense of project ownership that really can help lead to self-efficacy, which hopefully leads to enhanced science identity and potentially persistence in science if they are on a science pathway. Another theme we talked about, and I'm being conscious of the time here. Another theme we talked about was engagement, and how do you best engage these students? It's great if they're learning numeracy skills and data analysis and the process of science, as long as we don't lose the inspiration that astronomy had in the beginning. We have seen students who, when they realize how much math they might have to do, drop the class. And that's the opposite of what we want, right? So there has to be that balance between, let me tell you guys about black holes because they're incredibly crazy and awesome, versus like, now calculate the mass of this. We have to find that balance. And then there were interesting discussions about what they learn in astronomy. How does that help build the STEM workforce and increase their sort of employability and the options they have? So we talked a lot about engagement. I mentioned self-efficacy and STEM identity. authentic experiences that use real data, like we're talking about, can teach them about the scientific process and maybe enhance their curiosity. So these are the kinds of questions and hopefully answers we're coming to. Another theme was beyond the classroom. What can instructors do? So beyond just here's our pedagogy, what else can we do to help students succeed in our classes? You know, we have to think about our expectations of them and their expectations of what they're getting into. We have to think about their computer literacy, their knowledge, their pre-knowledge coming into the classes. Okay, this is way too many words. Don't read it. But what I wanted to emphasize here is the potential barriers to access to diverse student groups are many, very many. Especially in the community colleges these days, the demographics are so different than, say, even 20 years ago, where it was just all the students, you know, who grew up with parents who went to college and now they're going to college and full-time and all that. Now we have the working parents in college and the first generation students, getting their degrees. And it's just a whole different, and learning differences. It's just a whole different ballgame now. We have to be really cognizant of this. Again, way too many words on a slide, but hidden expectations. We assume they can imagine the things, like visualize in their brains the things we're talking about. We assume they have some background knowledge on solar systems, but I tell you, I work at the local observatory, and even that we cannot assume. When I interact with the 8th graders and the high school students, there's still so much that they don't know, and we have assumed for many years that they do know. Assumptions that the Western history of astronomy is the only history of astronomy. That's a big one. That's what gets taught. And yet it's such a global astronomy. It's the oldest science. It's been around all the cultures, and it's so different. The history of astronomy is so different in all these different cultures, and we need to address that. So we talked about best practices for recruitment and retention and the importance of reaching out to younger students and building the community. And finally, we talked about the last theme of astronomy education research. Where do we go from here? Who should we be studying? How should we be studying them? Is studying the impacts of Astronomy 101 too late in the educational trajectory, because we maybe can't influence where students go once they're already in college? Maybe we need to focus more attention on the middle school. I think that's really important, actually, to try and help prepare more students for science and math and technology and all these interesting things. So that is, let me stop screen sharing. That is what I'm trying to put into a document that's readable, interesting, valuable to the community. And thank you for listening.
Thanks, Rachel. I think that this, having been at this conference and attempted to run one of the sections, I'm just really grateful that you're on the job of trying to take all that was brain dumped in those 3 days with a lot of energy and getting something out. And in terms of this, the mission of this group here, I think that there's going to be a lot in that is worth us thinking about in terms of the students that are in front of us and where are they going and what are they facing, knowing how, kind of characterizing what they're coming in with. That's going to have some hot bits of information in it for us. So with that, are there any questions for Rachel specifically? Okay.
It was a lot of information.
There's a lot there. Oh, go ahead, Sophia.
Just an idle question. I mean, it's the progress I have to look at. I mean, I'm an old man. I'm retired. Half a century ago, I looked at, I was an undergraduate. There was a thing in my university where a senior could teach a class. And so he would work with an advisor, but yeah, you formulate a curriculum, you teach a class. And I looked at astronomy for non-science majors. And way back then I said, the class is not functioning. It meets for 3 quarters, so they cover all the topics. They're getting very little interest from the students. But what I did was I'm going to pick a few topics and cover them in depth. And the students are going to do projects, research projects of their own plan. But by picking a few topics and going more into them in detail. But if you selected, and the selection of process was, what are the students interested in? And also, what am I interested in? And since I'm a variable star freak, naturally that came up. But the whole point of this was by picking a few topics selectively. One was meteorites. Okay. That allows you to talk a lot about solar system stuff, but only as in context of this in-depth study. Another one was variable stars, pulsating variables, my thing. Okay, well, that allows you to talk a lot about stellar evolution and so on and so forth. And so so I did just a few topics, and that seemed to be much more successful. And over the years, as people have evolved their thinking about teaching Astronomy 101, it's much more the doing things rather than this long litany. But at the start of almost every 101 course, the professor says, oh, my goals are learn appreciate astronomy, learn about what science is, quack, quack. But the teaching methods don't fit that. So where are we with that now? I guess I'm asking after half a century.
So that's a great question. Unfortunately, there is not, based on my observations in classrooms, there has not been as much progress as we would have liked. That was a big part of our discussion. How do you use active learning strategies? How do you get students collecting their own data and taking ownership of projects, and through that learning the content? We want to move in that direction, but it's a big institution we're moving, this Astro 101 community, any education institution, that's 100 years old here. It takes a long time to move, but I think we are making progress. It's just never going to be as fast as we'd like. Yeah, great question.
And so, yeah, there'll be some good things that come out in that report. I'm going to take Sophia's question, and then we're going to have to hear from Mallory before we run out of time. So, Sophia, what do you got for us?
Hi, Rachel. Thank you for the presentation. There was a point that you made that maybe we could start doing astronomy from younger ages, like middle school and stuff. So I have actually worked a lot with schools, mainly from my country, from Colombia. And we have had a lot of help from the IAU Office for Education, for Development as well. So those are 2 different offices, and I think they have a lot of more resources, and I mean, they finance a lot of projects, and I think, if you're interested, that's a good place to look for resources. And I'm also happy to help, because that's been most of my experience in education.
Yeah, thank you. That's really great. The IAU is absolutely fabulous for helping people with the younger education and all the education. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot. Thank you, Rachel. And thank you for taking the time. I know what a job that was to even try and get some reasonable overview of that. And we're in the throes of writing. So thanks for taking the time away to talk to us. And with that, I introduce Mallory Conlon from Yerkes Observatory. And I'm really interested in hearing about Mallory's journey, through astronomy undergraduate and master's degree, and into her educational role at the historic observatory here in Wisconsin. So, and she's definitely interested in this topic of careers beyond academia, because she's on the committee too. So Mallory, thanks for taking the time to do this. And I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, sounds great. Thanks so much, Kate. Just going to go ahead and also get my screen sharing going here. So hopefully everybody can see that okay. So, as Kate mentioned, my name's Mallory Conlin. I am the outreach astronomer at Yerkes Observatory. And if you're not familiar with Yerkes, that's okay. It is an historic observatory in southern Wisconsin, and most famous for being home to the largest refracting telescope in the world. So I included 3 images that I really like to try to show the scale of exactly how big this telescope is. It has a 40-inch diameter lens and then a focal length of 63 feet. So the tube itself is about 63 feet. And my favorite picture in particular, let me get this out of the way, is this picture that I have on the right over here. I have a 5-year-old son, and this is a picture of him when he was about 3.5 years old when I first started working at Yerkes. And he was about 40 inches tall in this picture. So it gives you a good sense of scale for exactly how gigantic this telescope is. You didn't hear or invite me here to talk about Yerkes though. So let me talk a little bit about my background, my experience in astronomy, and then moving into a more education-focused career path. So my background is in astronomy. I have a bachelor's and master's in astronomy from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And when I was there, I did do sort of like that traditional research path. As an undergraduate, I researched variability in quasars, and then as a graduate student, looked at type 1a supernovae, how we could better use them as distance estimators. So I had that experience working in a research environment and really found that it didn't like spark a whole lot of joy for me to work in that sort of traditional research path. But what I did find a lot of meaning in and a lot of joy from were sort of my extracurricular activities. So as a student, I led and was part of the student-led astronomical society at University of Illinois. And then as a graduate student, as many graduate students do, I was given the opportunity to teach courses as a graduate student. But I found in those experiences that that's really what I enjoyed. I enjoyed sharing science with people from all different backgrounds. I liked talking about it with anybody who would want to listen. And these outlets not only gave me the opportunity to do that, but also to practice the skills that are necessary to have a career essentially in science communication. So these are some fun pictures to find. These are probably like 15-year-old pictures now, but there's me leading an astronomy club meeting in that top image. And then if anybody else is from University of Illinois, this is setting up for Quad Day, which is like the student clubs all come onto the quad at University of Illinois and try to recruit people for their clubs. So I eventually graduated and didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do with my path, but I knew that I wanted to be involved more in education. I had this content knowledge in astronomy, but I wanted to bolster that education knowledge, get to know those best practices in education, expand my understanding of what pedagogical techniques exist for STEM education. So I worked in an education research lab following graduation, and also started developing media for, you heard a lot about Astro 101 courses. I developed, along with the astronomy department, media that would go into an online Astro 101 essentially course at University of Illinois. And that was a really great experience for me because it gave me the chance to learn about best practices in STEM education and then also how to translate it into something engaging, something visual that students would be able to watch while they were taking this course. And that eventually led to my first job, like I guess real job, I guess you could say full-time position after graduation as an instructional designer. So I primarily worked with computer science courses at University of Illinois, getting their master's program put online. And then I ended up moving to Madison, Wisconsin, and worked as a STEM education consultant in higher education. So all these things were about a total of 8 years working in higher education as an instructional designer and a STEM education consultant. But part of me always just remembered how much joy I felt actually engaging with the public, and talking with young students and seeing their excitement about different science fields. So after, again, almost a decade of working in sort of like traditional higher education environments, I wanted something different. And I saw at UW-Madison that they had a position open for a quantum science outreach coordinator. And you might be wondering, how does one teach quantum science to K-12 students? Well, that was the joy of this position. I did actually get it, and spent 3 years implementing programming that was outlined in a grant that the department had already submitted. So it was a really great opportunity for me to sort of hone all of those skills that I had developed over the past 10 years, not only doing science communication in an informal sense, but also educating and having those techniques in my back pocket. So it was a little like I had some creativity room where I could create projects and initiatives that were, in my opinion, meaningful, but essentially I was working within the framework that they set up for their education and outreach program. But at this point now, like my outreach bug had come back to me, and I said, I'm an astronomer. Like physics is close, but I'm an astronomer when it comes down to it. So I had seen that there was a position open at Yerkes for a director of astronomy that they had just filled. So I reached out and I said, hey, like I want to work for you, Yerkes. Here's my information. Like if there's a role that you think I could fit in, please let me know. And they said, hey, there is a role. Would you want to, it was called something different when I initially applied, but essentially, would you like to lead the outreach and education program at Yerkes? Absolutely, I do. So in 2023, I joined the Yerkes team as outreach astronomer, like I said, leading the education and outreach initiatives at the observatory. And here, again, it's like the culmination of all the skills that I had learned leading up to this point, except for now I have so much more creative power over what sort of programming we run at the observatory. We do sort of like the traditional school visits and open houses, but we also welcome educators on site and have a lot of really unique relationships with the community where we can welcome people to make the observatory a place of community as opposed to just a place of science. So it's a really, really special place. But yeah, here's some fun pictures of me doing quantum science outreach. We can talk about that if anybody's interested in how you actually do that. One thing that I did want to showcase was just some advice for people who might be considering, okay, I have this astronomy degree, or I'm getting it, or I got an astronomy degree 10 years ago, but this is not the career path that I want. It's just 3 things that I found made really meaningful difference in what career path I ended up on. And this sounds like kind of silly and obvious, but thinking about what really sparks your interest and the work that you do that feels most meaningful has made a huge difference in like deciding if I wanted to stay at a job or if I wanted to pursue a new opportunity. It's our careers, right? There's expectations of what people want us to do, but then ultimately you have to work your job and have to work your career for a really long time. So it should be something that sparks interest for you and is meaningful. So thinking about that and just getting that idea into your head, here's what I like doing. And then reflecting on what sort of knowledge and skills you have or what you're good at from not only what you gain in your career, but things that you're also just naturally good at. For me, my husband always jokes that I have like a corpus callosum that's probably like the size of a ruler because I'm really good at multitasking. And that's a skill that I use every day in my job when I'm coordinating many different events that are happening over many different time periods. So I know what skills I'm good at. And then I also know what skills I got from my astronomy degree. For example, like the content knowledge obviously is very important for the role I'm in now, but problem solving and flexibility when things don't actually go right. I feel like astronomy definitely taught me how to handle those situations. And then most importantly for me, my transition from traditional research in astronomy towards a more education-focused role happened because I talked with somebody who gave me inspiration into exploring fields that were at this intersection of science and education. So Dr. Kim Coble, she came and gave a colloquium at University of Illinois, which was a really unique colloquium because it wasn't about like a research project related directly to an astronomical mission or data analysis or anything like that. It was talking about her work and understanding what students bring with them to these Astro 101 classes. And it took me a minute, like I was listening to her, I was like, oh my God, you can actually have a career that is science and is education and is academic and is all these things. And so I talked with her after that, and ultimately my master's thesis became related to science education as opposed to this more traditional research, astronomy research route. It was still that hard research, but it was focused on science education. So just talking with somebody who is doing something that I wanted to do gave me that inspiration to seek out a path that I could ultimately follow there. So that's just, my advice. Oh, and this is just a timeline of, because it helped me think about what was I doing in all of these years. This is just like the past 10 years of my life. So that is all that I have for everybody today. I'm super happy to take any questions now that people might have about my career or about Yerkes if you're interested in what we're doing there now. Or if you think of any questions, feel free to, here's my email, send me an email and we can connect. But yeah, thanks so much for inviting me today. You're muted,
Kate,
Kate.
you're muted.
Yeah, blame it on the dog. He's always making noise. I don't mute till you get to hear barking at some point. So yeah, I'm really excited about the collection of talks that we can curate and get out there so that people can just start searching and keeping these up to date too, because things are changing. Things are actually changing more than we really want them to right now, but seeing who is happy and successful in what they're doing and making contributions. So questions for Mallory, folks. What do you got?
I just have one. Oh, go ahead, Terry.
Just a question more about the employment climate. I was one of the people originally labeled as an EPO scientist in the NASA world when I headed up the education programs for Hubble. And that was a transition period where we just had the web come online, so we were doing the first online stuff. Great opportunity to have a lot of creative things. But back then, and it's a lot of my experience in the NASA world, the NASA had a requirement that a mission have a set aside. 1-2% of their budget had to be for education public outreach. And that meant there were funds. And we actually had a fair bit of resources at Space Telescope to create new things in this new environment of online World Wide Web stuff. So of course now you have a whole different environment, but the question is, okay, NASA doesn't do that anymore. Where are the opportunities? How big is the space today for someone who wants to do education, public outreach kinds of things?
Yeah. That's a great question. I feel like Kate and Rachel will probably also have great insight into this. So first I'll say we don't know what NASA or NSF, for example, how they are changing or what that is going to do to impact education and public outreach specifically. So I don't want to say I feel hopeful, but I'm not going to be negative about what's going to happen to education and public outreach in that sort of arena. So I'm not even going to touch that for right now. For me, Yerkes is a nonprofit and we are privately funded at this point. And there are many institutions across the country that are nonprofits that engage the public in science. So even in the Midwest, like you can think of the Adler Planetarium, for example. There's countless planetaria across the country, science institutions, museums that are always looking for educators. Maybe always is a strong word, but they're looking for educators and they need people to have those roles. So At universities, it's a bigger question, but there are nonprofits that have opportunities available still. I don't know, Kate or Rachel, if you want to add anything there.
Rachel, did you want to go first? Do you have anything?
I would have had an answer like 3 months ago, and now I don't know.
Yeah, so we, Glass Education is a nonprofit, and we have cobbled together various funding formulas for ourselves, but part of it was a journey of 7 years to get ourselves established with NASA and the National Science Foundation. It was 7 years of hard work to get ourselves to the point where we're credible and we were receiving funds from National Science Foundation. As of right now, that is gone. It zeroed out, anything that we had going with NASA or with the National Science Foundation, other than right now my sonification work, because it's data science and not education, because primarily what we're doing is disability access and STEM education outreach and career advancement. So that's the thing we're cool and look really nifty with. But we have a broad depth in that. So when I look at people who are in it as of right now, I would tell people to just stay the course in what they think they're passionate about, and just don't make any sudden shifts now. Go ahead and give it time. And, but always have a backup plan, and now you definitely need one. And to, what is your other passions? So I tell this to anybody that in mentoring is that do you have a language skill? Do you have an art skill, a music skill? What other things are you adding to keep those going just as strongly? Because you never know what you're going to end up putting together. And particularly in the burgeoning field of data sonification, I am finding a very, very diverse skills coming together for that. And I think that's only going to increase. So continue on your education route, keep all your skill sets going, keep your network going, and just stay the course and breathe and see if you can make it through the next 6 months or a year. Going to tell the tale. Do we have other questions?
I have a really random question for Mallory, which is, how did you know what the corpus callosum was?
That's funny. So my husband studied biology. He has his degree is in science education, but his background is more in biology. So he loves to make that comment about me. But the corpus callosum is what connects your left hemisphere and the right hemisphere of your brain. And people who are very good at multitasking or keeping track of many different things maybe have a bigger corpus callosum than other people.
Okay, yeah. See,
Yeah.
when you said it, I was like, I know what that is, but that's because I have a master's degree in neuroscience from 20 years ago.
And I have no information about neuroscience, just my husband's background.
Okay.
Biology.
Just
Yeah.
wondering.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing your story, Mallory. It's a really cool story.
Of course. Thank
It was
you.
fun. It's fun. Anybody else have questions?
I guess so. Jeffrey, you gave a talk last time, is that right? And I wasn't here. Just in a sentence, where are you in your career life?
So I've been a data scientist for the last 8 years.
Okay, all right. Working where? What?
A variety of tech companies. I was at a
Got it.
small startup. I was at Zoom. I was at Mozilla, and now I'm a contractor for Pacific Gas and Electric.
Okay, all right, cool. Thanks.
And he
And
had some
Sophia, I'm
great.
curious. I'm just curious what Sophia is.
Hi, I'm currently a postdoc at UCLA. So I'm still doing research, but I want to learn about these not only for myself, but also many students here who are curious.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay, thanks. Thanks.
And that would bring me down to one last question. I always want to know, what, if you have any other resources or recommended people you'd like us to see spotlighted on the COCO.
I could make one comment. While I was at Hopkins for a decade, I was the assistant director of the Maryland Space Grant Consortium. Each state has a space grant, and they fund internships, scholarships, and I don't know what their future is, but so far they've been below the radar. They haven't been killed like Sea Grant. Could happen tomorrow. But they're a resource for getting particularly summer internships in astronomy, astrophysics, aerospace engineering. And we cranked out a lot of those. And I think that's one place you should consider contacting if you have not in any given state. To talk to them to see what connections they may have or what they might do. I will just say we established an idea that I put forward that we got funded in Maryland was to say you have a bunch of universities, they all have interns of some kind in the summer. Well, instead of just hiring your own students, let's exchange them. Let's take ones from your school and send them to the other schools and split them around so that they get an exposure, more networking, different kinds of instruments, different kinds of techniques, new professors, maybe scout out a graduate school, and that worked really well. But I mean, the space grants are all different, so they have different programs, but you at least should look to see what they might have. And at the moment, as far as I know, they still have funding, so funding is a good thing.
Yeah, I was really pleased to see that they were space grants were listed specifically on a appropriations request bill a few weeks ago. So when they sent that whole NASA thing, they were specifically cited.
That took us many visits to the Hill to have that put up there, let me tell you.
Okay, good. It's good to have some news of that's not devastating. Thank you. Any other people with suggestions or wish list for to-do list for COCO?
Not off the top of my head.
That's okay. Just you all know where to find me.
Yeah.
And with that, I think we can put a wrap on it for today. So I thank you all for coming, and we'll see you again next month. To the next COCO is May 15th, 12 p.m. Central. Okay.
All right.
Where
Thanks,
we
everyone.
Thank you.
So
Bye.
far, it looks like we'll have Shoal Henny to talk about the National Academies report as the resource, and I'm still hunting down my career spotlight person for that month, but I have a couple leads. All right.
All right.
Soon.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.